The space race has had many leaders across the globe since it began many years ago. While it was usually a race held between governments and countries, one unlikely entrant isn't representative of a country at all. Instead, it's a private company called SpaceX, spearheaded by Elon Musk. Strap in and fire up your boosters. It's time for a SpaceX mission to Mars.